G'day everyone, and welcome to episode number 11 of the Australian Rock Show, Ozrock's loudest and proudest music podcast. My name is Colin Gray from the Rockin' and Rollin' Gray Brothers, and today is the 15th day of March 2015 when this show is being recorded. You know, back in 1976, Philip Foxman went straight from high school and into Supernaut, one of Australia's biggest bands of the time. And over the past 35 plus years, Philip has had a career as both a songwriter and a musician, a career that has included hit songs on MTV, two critically acclaimed solo albums, as well as having his songs appear in both films and TV. We spoke to Philip on Tuesday the 10th of March about everything from Supernaut and The Nauts right through to his current projects, including the off-Broadway rock musical known as Atomic. But before we get into the interview, let's get in the mood with a song. This is Supernaut and Too Hot to Touch. Philip, welcome to the Australian Rock Show. You've had a lengthy career which has covered many styles, from glam to punk to new wave to electronic to a solo career that continues to this day. I don't think I've seen too many artists transcend as many musical styles as you have. As a musician and a songwriter, has that been important to you to stay current musically, or rather, have you always been interested in different styles of music that you wanted to explore?
Look, I've always been interested in how music works, and how songs work. You approach songs, in different ways, in different musical styles require you to approach songs in different ways, like funk songs. It's pretty much you just keep the groove going and you do your melodies over the top of the grooves. Folk songs are much more about chord changes, Electronic music is a lot about developing a feel through the electronic drum grooves and the sounds and having some kind of melody over the top. I've always been interested in how songs work in each area, and I've also found that as a songwriter, you get more interested in the challenge of writing a great electronic song or a really great kind of, funk song or, a really great pop song. It's always, I just love the art of songwriting, and to stick in one area, for me, is just a little bit frustrating. So, yeah, I tried to explore. When the opportunities came up, when it was more like a particular type of band, I was around the particular type of music and I really liked it. I would explore writing using my songwriting abilities within that format, and that's why I've gone through so many different styles. Okay, and I guess today I certainly do want to delve into your past and talk about the bands that you are most well known for, but I also want to sort of cover the contemporary period and your most recent musical activity. So if you've got a little bit of time, maybe 20 minutes, 25 minutes, we can go right to the beginning of your formative years. Yeah. So you're a Sydney native. You were born and raised in Sydney? Yeah, I was born, my parents were Holocaust survivors, Polish Jewish Holocaust survivors. So we kind of grew up in Bondi, which was at the time was kind of a working class kind of ghetto kind of thing.
But not anymore.
No.
Were your family musical at all? Did you grow up in a musical family?
And my father was into his rabbinical music on Saturdays, and then they would around the house, it would end up being show tunes, South Pacific, songs that they really loved, and Tom Jones and people like that. And then they would go out, and then my sister would torture me with love ballads and things. And so, yeah, my sister was a keyboard player, but other than that, no, it wasn't. No one played an instrument. It was just everyone loved music.
So you picked up the bass guitar as your first instrument?
Well, not really. I was mainly guitar player, acoustic guitar player. Okay. And as a result of I was writing songs on that and trying to play piano. And, a band came along and they needed a bass player. So I picked up the bass guitar and started playing and realized how much I loved playing bass guitar. And it became, a very important instrument. But I've always been writing most of my songs on acoustic guitar and keyboards.
And I guess, Sydney, early 70s, particularly late 60s, early 70s was a very fertile place for music, and the live circuit in particular was very healthy. Do you remember the first concert that you ever saw?
Well, it was a pretty interesting time. I mean, I know the first concert I wish I would have seen was going to be Led Zeppelin at the. I really wasn't crazy. I wasn't really into live music, and then a week after they came, I became crazed with it. But the first proper show, there were a lot of local bands, but they were small local bands, friends, musicians, guys a little older. But the real concert I think that made an impression on me was Split Enz at Checkers. Their first gig in Australia or Sydney.
Huh, wow.
And it was incredible because they were all theatrics at the time. They were all covered in white makeup and strings coming off from the ceilings like the puppets. And it was mind-blowing because I'd never seen music performed like that before. And then, yeah, that left a massive impression on me. And also there were a lot of bands, like 2 or 3 bands touring at the same time. And there were all these, Checkers was a great place to see it. And yeah, Sydney was a very, very exciting live music place in the early 70s.
And I guess it was looking at, sort of 76. 76 was a big year for you, but prior to joining Supernaut, you were in a band called White Heat, which also featured Chris Jones, who was in TV Jones with Dennis Tech, and later to be on in Finch and Feather. Was that your first band, and did White Heat ever demo or record anything?
No, it wasn't my first band. I was in a couple of other bands. I was in a band called Prothallus with Mark from Hoodoo Gurus, Mark Kingsmill and I.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we were in a band called Prothallus for a little while, and that was a really fun band. We used to rehearse in his living room, and his brother, who became head of Triple J, would be running around pulling all the girls and bringing them to his brother's show. So it was a pretty interesting time. But I was also in high school bands, and White Heat was was just after Prothallus. White Heat came about because I was trying to put together a band with some of my favorite musicians. We found Chris Jones. He was from a newspaper ad, and he was this stellar guitar player that just changed everybody's lives. He was a major rock star. And yes, he'd been playing with Dennis Tech, who I'd been jamming with as well at different times.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it was an interesting period. I had met Dennis through different people as well, and around the Darlinghurst area, we used to just go up to this rehearsal studio, which is like a big loft somewhere, office building, and people would just bring their guitars and just kick out the jams, basically. And Chris was very influential to all of us at that time, because we were really just like count into bands like Led Zeppelin, Deep Purple, Bad Company kind of bands, Supertramp, and Chris Jones just brought Detroit to Bondi. Him and Dennis Tech and Radio Birdman, they just sort of was like opened their eyes, and then suddenly these guys that were just playing the basic covers suddenly were pushed to play these other songs. And throughout all this period, I was still writing songs and pushing myself as a songwriter. But, it was hard to compete against some of these songs. So it was a learning process. But Chris, actually, we just got together recently. His friends put this night together of all these bands from that period, and Chris and I have been playing together again, just jamming. Very interesting.
Oh, really?
Yeah, great player, Chris Jones, great guitar player.
In February 76, Supernaut moved from their native Perth to Melbourne, and you joined the band in August 76 after answering a bass player wanted ad in RAM, replacing original bass player Randall Murphy. Is that correct?
Exactly. It was quite a funny situation. I was in my last year of high school, year 12, and we were just getting ready to do the HSC. And I had stopped playing in bands. I stopped White Heat earlier because it was too much. And I thought, well, I'll just pick it up again when I go to university if I got in. So I just had to concentrate. And that Sunday before, I was obviously, as we all were, addicted to Countdown. I'd been sitting and Supernaut came on singing I Like It Both Ways. And I was just sitting there. I was just mesmerized because I thought if I could be in the band, I would want to be in this band, right? It was one of those moments. And then a couple of days later, I was at school and I just needed to take some time out. I just sort of went down the road to pick up RAM, read it, and I thought, my God, how perfect is this? So I just called up a record company. They told me to speak to the manager in Melbourne. He said they were auditioning the following day. So he said, if you want to come down to Melbourne, come down and we'll audition you. So I told my folks I was going to go stay at a friend's house overnight. Got some money from a friend and just jumped on the plane for the first time, grabbed my bass and jumped on the plane. And I flew down, got into the auditions. It was cold auditions. I said, here's the song, just play along. And then they asked me to join. And so that I came back to Sydney and packed up my stuff, made sure my folks weren't around because they were not going to let me join a rock and roll band. And how crazy is this, right?
That is. That's an amazing story.
And I actually at that I had no money, so I had a watch that I just sort of sold to a friend, so I could get back down to Melbourne, and took off. And then I called my folks from Melbourne. I said, "Listen, I'm sorry to tell you this, and it was hell. It was hellish.
Meant to be, man. That's an amazing story. And had Supernaut signed to Polydor at that stage or not?
Yeah. I Like It Both Ways was out.
Okay, so the single was out.
Yeah, the first single hit, and that was the song that grabbed me. And them playing live. No, it wasn't their video. It was them playing live, miming on Countdown, which grabbed me. Because I thought, wow, I was totally into all those, every aspect of what that band was doing, the glam, the rock. I understood instinctively what Supernaut was trying to do from every level. And that's why I think they accepted me. And it was quite funny because one minute I'm this kid living in Bondi playing in high school bands. Next minute I'm in Melbourne, in St Kilda, in a 2-bedroom apartment, sleeping in bed in a room in 2 beds. Chris and Joe, the brothers, and Gary and me, we're all sharing these 2 beds together. And I'd never met these guys before. And now you're in a rock and roll band. And it was like, what the heck? It was an amazing moment.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
I had read somewhere, I can't remember where, fairly recently, that Supernaut had signed to Polydor on Molly Meldrum's recommendation after he'd been tipped off about Supernaut by Paul McCartney. Have you heard that rumor?
Well, what exactly happened was McCartney and Molly went on a trip to Perth and different cities to look and the idea was they were just going to go look at different bands, And McCartney said his favorite band from that whole trip was seeing this little band in Perth play in a pub, and it was Supernaut. And so that incited the band to come to Melbourne. Just that in and of itself. Everyone said, what the hell, let's just go down to Melbourne. And their manager, obviously played the demos to our manager, Robbie Williams, played the demos to Molly, and Molly loved the song, and he put them straight in the studio.
So you go into the studio with Tony Cohen to record the debut Supernaut album.
Yes.
What are your memories of that recording session?
Oh, it was pretty amazing because, as I said, I just pretty much left Sydney and joined them. Picked me up at the airport. They took me straight to a television station where we had to mime a song. And then the next day for the next 10 days, we were closed up in a rehearsal studio working on songs. And so it was all about writing arrangements and writing songs and doing the work together. And it was pretty intense because the pressure was really on. Everyone wanted I Like It Both Ways as a huge hit. Too Hot to Touch was looking like it was going to be a huge hit. An album was necessary. And so we got into the studio, and Tony Cohen at the time was just a tape op. He wasn't really much of an engineer. And what happened was we really liked him. Well, they really liked him for Both Ways, and then we brought him in to be the engineer for the album. And it was an amazing experience because we were all quite young at the time. Tony may have been a year or two older than us, whatever. But we were at Armstrong Studios. The studios were just creepy, haunted, stuff happening everywhere. Doors, bathroom doors slamming, poltergeist slamming. We would come into a room and everything would go off, and then everything would go on. We wouldn't go after like 9, 10 at night. We wouldn't go to the bathrooms alone because you'd hear doors slamming. It was incredible. I mean, the sessions were very intense because we were producing ourselves with Tony Cohen, and Tony hadn't ever really done anything major at the time. We were his first real record. And and what I found, you read Molly's book? Have you read Molly's book?
I haven't. I've read excerpts of it, but I haven't finished it.
And what we found very, sort of like real upset was what his indication of what it was like recording Supernaut, which from the memories of everyone, it wasn't like that at all. I mean, there was a lot of other issues. I think Tony got his break by playing the Supernaut, recording the Supernaut at the beginning, and then years later, when he wasn't in such a great physical position in life, Chris dragged him out of his squat in Sydney and got him back to start recording with him. So I was amazed that he didn't speak as highly as he did of Supernaut. But anyway.
Okay. Yeah. So I guess I briefly mentioned before about 1976 being a stellar year. So by the end of 1976, this band you've joined have toured nationally with Hush.
Yeah.
You've had a number one album and a number one single, and then you start to get all the accolades surrounding that, the TV Week, King of Pop Awards, etc. Yeah. All for a bunch of guys at 18. I mean, that is an amazing scenario. Did you pinch yourself at the time? Or how do you look back at that period now? What do you think made Supernaut have such an initial impact?
Look, it was pretty amazing to be 18 years old and going through such an incredible ride. I mean, where you were one of the biggest, for like a heartbeat, we were one of the biggest bands in Australia. I think for about a year. By the time the Hush tour finished, we were bigger than Hush, which was pretty amazing, And then the King of Pop Awards came, and that we didn't expect to win. We thought it was going to be Old 55 or something like that, so we weren't even prepared for it. And then when we won King of Pop, and then we won Best Video, everything also changed for us at that point. It was very much a pinch yourself moment, but you have to think. Also, in our heads, we were, that's what we wanted to do. We all wanted to be rock stars. We all wanted that success, and we all kind of, in our heads, we were living it all the way. We knew you knew how it was going to be because you sort of read all the books and listened to the stories of all the bands before us. So it was kind of like wanting to live that life, and you do pinch yourself because a couple of times I go in my room where I had all my guitars to make sure I really had 4 guitars. Which I thought, you know what I mean? I remember thinking, is that? But it did come fast, but we earned it. It wasn't like we were a bunch of kids that were put together by a guy and given songs, and someone else recorded it, and we just looked good and smiled and danced. We actually did the hard work. We performed on stage. We performed with some of the biggest bands at the time, and opened for them, and in most cases were better than them at that time. And what we think our impact was, I think what Supernaut, well, I'm finding out as time goes on, you find out more about how, I can't talk about my impressions. That question's more about what was our impression on others. And what it came down to was that the lyrics of that song and the message behind I Like It Both Ways and the way we looked and the way we sounded was so different at the time for an Australian band to come out with something so sort of sexually provocative. But it made people, who listen to the song, and a lot of people do question their sexuality every now and then, put them in a position where they sort of question their sexuality for a moment, and then these great performances, and I think we left quite an indelible impression on the Australian music industry with that one song. And it seems to have, over the years, what we're finding, at the time it was just all teeny bopper girls screaming and everything, but over the years, more and more guys are coming out and saying, dude, that song was amazing. It really, I did love you guys at the time. And, I think the band have left a very sort of important impression from people from the 70s onwards,
Yeah, it's almost, but when you look back at that album, it's almost as if Both Ways and Too Hot to Touch, a couple other tunes, almost very separate to the rest of the songs on the album. Stuff like, I mean, there's a lot going on musically. Stuff like Mountain Song and Contact and Mover. They're good examples of the quality and diversity of the songwriting. So I think, you know, maybe a lot of people bought the album for, you know, the hit, but there's a lot going on if they played the album in its entirety. There's a lot of progressive stuff in that songwriting for young guys.
Yeah, you know, I was talking to Chris Burnham today about it, and I was telling him that. And what was going on, well, you've got to remember also that everything in those days was hit record motivated, you know?
Sure.
Everything was about the 3.5-minute song. And the idea was if you could come up with a couple of 2 or 3 strong hit songs, then you could do whatever you want on the rest of the album. And that seemed to be what a lot of bands were doing. And for us, that was the case too. And but that album captured a lot of our musical influences that we wanted to express. You know, at the time, who knew what was going to happen after this? This could be the only album we'll ever record, you know? And so you put everything into it. You know, I was playing keyboards in a lot of the songs. We spent a lot of time trying to, and also we had a bit of a chip on our shoulder. We wanted to prove to people that, you know, look through both ways, look through Taught to Touch, and you'll see a really great band. And that's what we were doing. And some of those, and then it's interesting, the Teeny Boppers loved those songs as well. Like, you know, so it really translated well, I think, that album.
And I guess that's where, you know, getting the exposure on Countdown could have been a little bit of a double-edged sword, couldn't it? Because on the one hand, different times it's nowadays, but back then, I suppose, if you're on Countdown, it meant you could play Shepparton Town Hall. You could reach every far-flung corner of the country. You know, you're in everyone's living room. But musically, I suppose, you know, how did the serious music fans view the album when they, other than the hit singles?
They didn't really. They didn't really want to, you know. I mean, you're right. Countdown's influence was amazing. I mean, we were the first band to tour the Northwest, and that was playing to, you know, thousands of people in paddocks, basically, on top of truck beds. And it was mum and dads and their dogs and their kids, you know, everything. And, you know, even we played prisons, you know, because of Countdown. And Countdown was was the only real tool for reaching massive audiences. And if you didn't do Countdown, you weren't going to get radio airplay because it was all...
Sure.
And the bands that were around that were just really serious musician bands, they weren't going to come anywhere near us anyway. So, and we were young and we wanted to be part of the culture. So we had no problem with Countdown. We loved it. We loved the whole energy of it. It was only towards at the end of Supernaut where it became a little bit difficult for us to break out of the Countdown.
Okay, and I guess that sort of segues a little bit into my sort of next question, because the band had strong follow-up singles in 77 and 78, you know, post the album, singles such as Young and Innocent, Kids Are Out Tonight. Yet with the advent of punk, interest in Supernaut perhaps dwindles somewhat. Yet that last Supernaut single, Unemployed, is very much a punk tune and an indication of the sound that the band will employ as the Nauts. And the band recorded a second album called Exile, or Test Pressing, which was never released. Did any of those tunes on that unreleased album end up on the Nauts album, or were they shelved for good?
That album that we're talking about, it was a very difficult album to record because it was, you know, the album that we had to do after a really big one. And we put ourselves in a very difficult position by trying to record it late at night. And it was also, a lot was happening in the world of music that we really loved. The whole punk thing was evolving. We wanted to be part of it, but we still had the record companies and everyone wanted us to continue the whole Supernaut vibe. I think Spies was a good example of what we really wanted to do. It's a really interesting song, and I think for us, Spies, it was a very important song because it was when the second album did come out, that was one of the seminal songs. But getting back to Unemployed was for us our signature tune to say, yes, this is what we want to do going forward. We got a lot of backlash because of it. people just don't want to let you out of that,
No.
I think that's it. You can't be this.
Yeah.
You can't change. You have to be
Yeah.
like this. We turned down,
Yeah.
just for the record, we turned down thousands of dollars to do tours with bands like Bay City Rollers. These bands were coming through begging for us to play. We were like, there's no way, So we were trying to carve our way musically, and it was very, there was a lot of resistance. Yes, a few of those songs did show up on a later compilation that came out on Shock Records.
Okay, let's take a break, Philip, and let's listen to that single from 1978. This is Supernaut and Unemployed. So, mid-1978, you guys relocate to Sydney. You go back to your punk roots, and you reinvent yourself as the Nauts. You sign to Robbie Porter's Wizard label, and you release an amazing self-titled album in 1979, which, not just in my opinion, but a lot of people's opinion, is a landmark Australian punk new wave album with many great tunes, such as Black Market World and Doll 000. What are your memories of the Nauts and any of the Sydney bands that you were playing out with at that time?
We needed a change, Melbourne, we weren't fitting into the whole Melbourne thing. Everyone was just had enough. So we came up to Sydney because actually Sydney was quite exciting at the time. There were a lot of really cool small punk clubs all around, especially in Oxford Street and Darlinghurst, in the city area, Mansell Room and all these other really interesting places. And so we thought we would strip the bride bare and just start doing really small clubs and just get our reputation as a really cool little punk band or punk rock band, really. And Sydney was perfect at the time. The only problem with Sydney and doing that kind of music is to look punk, you got to be dressed in leather jackets and black. And we didn't really fit in again. We would get to these places and we would get to these really cool gigs and we'd get up on stage and we'd start doing our stuff and we'd get heckled and gobbed on. And it wasn't easy. It was a difficult time. And it made us very resentful because we felt, we were doing clubs like the Bondi Lifesavers, which was a really great club in Bondi Junction. And we were playing, and they would finish a set and then people would just start calling us names. And next thing you know, there's a brawl going on. Half the guys in the band couldn't take it anymore. They jump off on stage. So Sydney was great. We loved being here. We had some great times. Some clubs were open to us, but overall, it just became very depressing. The bands that were really great, we were around some really great bands like the Scientists, the Hitmen, Birthday Party, and Radio Birdman were great. But we were like these guys that were never going to get accepted, no matter how hard you tried. And that was it.
Okay, and I guess the sound that the Nauts were playing was very much an English influenced sort of electronic punk sound, for want of a better term.
Yeah.
So was it only sort of natural that the band said, okay, let's go to England, let's try and try our luck there?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there was ongoing conversation about it, like Both Ways getting released on Virgin Records, and we were really excited about that because we thought, well, that could be our break. Somewhere along the line, contractually wise, whatever, it never got released. So by the time we got over there, we had enough of Australia. We were really despondent, and our manager sort of didn't follow through with us being over there. So here we are, 5 guys, and we just sort of needed some time just to sort of get ourselves back together again. And I think what it evolved is Supernaut. We all started wanting to, because we were all individual songwriters, which was the strength of Supernaut's strength was we all were individually strong songwriters. And in some cases we co-wrote, other cases we wrote the whole songs. But I think over the time, especially for myself, I started wanting to do more and more of my own material. We finally started rehearsing in London to do some gigs and whatever, and the vibe just wasn't there. There was just the thing that we had was just what didn't exist anymore. That energy, that need to play together, just didn't seem to work. So I left, came back here. The others, Chris, Joe, and Gary, sort of stayed together, formed a band called This Is This, and they just played around London. We recorded some independent singles, and for a couple of years, and then I came back here, and then decided to go back to the UK.
Okay, so you go back to the UK and you form the band Illustrated Man with Rob Dean from Japan and Roger Mason of the Models. How did that band come about?
Well, before I left, I had a bunch of songs. I made it my package. I'd gone to New York while I was overseas before and realized how incredible it was, and I wanted to get over there. So but I had a bunch of songs that I thought could work internationally and represented me as a songwriter. So I worked out a way of recording songs by going from one cassette player to the next and bouncing back and forward, and finally had some rough demos. So I turned up in London and and was staying with the guys from Supernaut, and I sort of walked around from record company to record company, knocking on doors, using whatever excuse I could to meet the A&R guys. I finally got in to see EMI. They listened to the tracks, they liked them, and they said, okay, well, listen, we'll give you a couple of days in our studio. You can do some recording, and if we like it, we'll sign you. So I pulled together a couple of the guys from Supernaut and a few other people, and we recorded the songs. Then EMI passed on it, and I said, well, what the hell, I'll go to New York and give it a shot. Capitol Records decided they wanted to sign me, gave me an international recording contract, and sent me back to London. And when I was there, I contacted Roger because I knew him through being with James Freud, and we all were friends. And I always thought that he was an amazing musician to play with. And Roger knew Rob Dean because they had been in Gary Newman band together. And so I brought Joe Burnham over from Australia, and we started recording the first of the Illustrated Man records. And then he left, and we got Hugo Burnham from Gang of Four to replace him. And we recorded the album, and it was that's how that came together.
And again, you've had a change of musical style. Head Over Heels single there goes top 20 in the States and has high MTV rotation.
That's right.
I mean, so that's 6 years after Supernaut and 1984. Your quality of your songwriting is starting to sort of shine through.
That was an interesting time because I really liked the dance pop rock thing that was going on, and I felt that I could say something musically, songwriting as a lyricist, and I thought, well, this is an interesting area to do it in, and it was. I felt that getting the right people around us was a good way to do that kind of songwriting, and yes, it was different to Supernaut in many ways because it was, as I said, it was funk rock pop driven songs, a lot of, and that was a challenge to do that kind of stuff, and I really liked the Illustrated Man album because of the styles that and the production values that we had on that were quite high at the time.
So you relocate permanently to New York in the mid 1980s, is that correct?
Yeah. After Illustrated Man imploded, we kind of toured, did a really difficult tour. We toured England, first of all, and we played with a lot of bands over there. We opened up for, Cyndi Lauper and Nick Kershaw, and did a lot of stuff there. And then we toured the States, and it was great to tour America. I really fell in love with New York at the time, and by that stage, Illustrated Man kind of ran out of fuel. There was a lot of internal issues with the band. So, yes, I decided at that point that I'll go back and sort of move to New York and try my luck over there.
Okay, and is this about the time in your life that you start getting into the area of composing for TV commercials as well as TV shows? Not
exactly. I was playing in bands immediately. I had a second version of Illustrated Man. I put together a really cool band in New York, and we immediately started playing nightclubs and TV. We're doing cable TV shows and different things. And so that was originally my idea. And then what happened was I started running my own independent record label, and people started coming to me for songs for movies and TV shows. To sync up to their films, and so I started writing songs for TV shows and films at that point.
Okay, so you've always maintained, as well as writing songs for TV and film, you've always maintained that performance aspect of your life, always still performing with a band.
Oh yeah, all through that period. I mean, I loved songwriting, and songwriting was always is and was back then my main passion. However, it was also a challenge to be put in front of a film and say, okay, we need a song here, we need a song there. Can you write me a song that works for this? Can you write me a song for that? And that was a real challenge because you're working in a different type of medium with directors and different things, and the images are telling you what sort of song it needs. So yeah, I really enjoyed doing that, and it was very hard work. And also I became a music supervisor at the time as well. So I was not only writing the songs, I was also finding and placing songs in these independent films and TV shows. And yeah, a lot of my stuff got licensed by MTV, my own albums, and then they started using them.
Okay, so as a songwriter, is it more lucrative nowadays to try to get your songs into film or TV? Is that a way of getting them heard more so? Is that important nowadays more so than ever before?
Well, in some cases, yes, because it does give you a really great revenue stream as a songwriter. It's very difficult. It's not as easy as anyone would think, because it's right now one of the major areas to stand out in music, getting a song on a TV show. So it is lucrative if you can get an opening or closing cut on a TV show. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, and I guess just, sort of scratching the surface a little here, some of your songs have appeared in films, including Anarchy TV, alongside Soundgarden, Iggy Pop, and domestic TV shows here, including Neighbours and Bondi Rescue. So maybe people have watched those shows and they're not familiar that they're your tunes.
I guess so, But that's the nature of that sort of environment,
Sure.
Actually, you do get a lot of hits off that. People do come to my websites because some of it, like the MTV shows in particular, they would list the songs. And so what I had, my songs were selling on iTunes all over the world as a result. And then you look at Neighbours. Neighbours is a massively international song show. And to this day, I still get people buying my songs, hearing them on Neighbours, tracking down what the artist was and buying songs on iTunes off Neighbours. So yeah, it can be very lucrative, and it is an interesting way to get your music out there.
And I guess I wanted to sort of touch a little bit on the band that you had called Crash.
Yeah.
At the start of the interview, we talked about how you've, I guess, always moved into different genres and styles. Now, Crash was an electronic dance band who had a big dance hit called Man, Machine and Human Dreams. Now, I'll level with you, I'm not normally a fan of this kind of music, but when I heard the tune, I thought, man, this is a good tune because it's got melody and it's catchy.
Exactly. I mean, once again, I was very enticed by the challenge of writing a really great electronic rock dance song. I mean, most of the stuff that was going like Skinny Puppet and Nine Inch Nails and a lot of Ministry, all that stuff was going on, and a lot of it had energy, but you couldn't sing anything after it burnt your brains out in a club, and that was all great and fun. But we also wanted to make Crash a live band, and it was. We integrated all the sort of technology that was available at the time, even though it was a little difficult because sometimes the drum machines wouldn't work and whatever, and you're schlepping these massive electronic things up on stage, computer systems and whatever on stage to get everything working. But we did perform around New York a lot in a lot of the major clubs. Man, Machine and Human Dreams was taken up by a major DJ called Tony Fletcher at the time. And they were really big into remixing stuff for clubs. And so that was a big dance, as I said, a big dance hit as a result of that. I enjoyed the process because I was much more of just a singer, lyricist, melody contributor to Crash. And it was a different approach to songwriting because we would create these really great grooves. And then I would come up with these melodies and structure them with choruses like a real song. And that's why I think the Crash songs still sound pretty good today.
Okay, and then I guess post-Crash, you're back performing again, but you're performing as an acoustic singer-songwriter, for want of a better term, and you've released a couple of solo CDs. Can you tell us about those a little?
Well, a lot of people a lot of friends of mine who were following my music and everything said, you got to get back to your singer-songwriter stuff, because they really liked it. And I was building up a large catalog of songs. And there were a lot of things going on musically at the time that I really liked, in that whole sort of singer-songwriter, country, rock, folk kind of thing that was coming out of America. And so I really sort of gravitated to it. And I also very strong to songs with strong storylines. Especially Westforth and Charles is full of some of those things. And I saw it and I was really getting into a lot of Dylan-esque, Neil Young kind of material. And I was getting really influenced, Tom Petty, all those bands. And I really liked what I could do songwriting-wise. It's much more in control, and I wanted to bring, a little different take on it as well. So Westforth and Charles was the corner where I lived in New York, and most of the album was recorded in this apartment with a whole lot of high-tech recording gear, and we played around a lot. And there was a bunch of songs that were really, critically acclaimed from that album, and then that went well. And then I decided after that, all through that, we were playing major clubs. We were opening up for, different bands. What was the Talking Head? One of the Talking Heads bands, the Tom Tom Club, Tom Club, and various different large bands in New York. And then I decided to do Up Antenna, because I had a feeling about putting songwriting structures to electronics. Again, I wanted to play with electronics and acoustic. I wanted an acoustic electronic album, and that's what Up Antenna ended up being, with, once again, storylines, very strong storylines. And I think I achieved that with that album, especially a couple of the songs like You're Everything and You Belong, or We Belong, and songs like that off that album. Yeah.
Very much so. Look, let's take a listen to Your Everything. Now, I guess we're coming up to the sort of most contemporary and recent period. So most prominently, or most recently rather, you've written a off-Broadway rock opera called Atomic, which explores the creation of the atomic bomb as the storyline. Now, that played at Nidus Parade Theatre in Kensington in Sydney in late 2013. Can you tell us a little bit of a background about that production and how it played in New York, where it played, and what brings you back to Australia at the moment for that production?
Well, it came. I'd only written some small sort of rock musicals, very small, like 2 or 3 character ones, and it was more an exploration of how to put songs into. Because I've always been fascinated with theater and songs, and I want like Bertolt Brecht and people like that, and Sam Shepard, and I always wanted to do something on that level. So I was sort of doing that with the various theater companies in New York. So years later, I'm back here, and a friend of mine suggested me to someone who was writing the book for Atomic, and he came to me and said, look, with this story about the dramatic history of the atomic bomb told through the story of Leo Szilard, who came up with the chain reaction which helped create the atomic bomb. And I thought, what a great idea for a musical. And I was very clear. I said, I don't want to write show tunes. I want this to be like a rock musical. I liked, Jesus Christ Superstar. I liked, Hair. I liked those kind of musicals. I liked, Next to Normal, these really unusual but more contemporary rock kind of shows. And so we all agreed that the songs would go down that way. So, and I also wanted to do a lot of standalone songs. I didn't want it to be just cuts and bits and pieces. So we went about doing it, and we got the backing, and we performed it. We did the whole production at NIDA, and it got rave reviews there. And then we got the backing to go to New York and perform off Broadway at a place called the Acorn Theater on 42nd and 9th Street. And it got mixed reviews, a majority of really great reviews, some a little scathing, but that's life. But it's a fascinating story, and there's a lot of interest in it. People want to do it into films. People want us to come back and do it again in the States next year. We're doing it in 2 other cities. They're licensing it. We're rewriting it now. So the songs are very kind of, Coldplay, U2, meets Muse with the elements of Jesus Christ Superstar and Les Mis. They're these big sort of anthemic kind of songs. And when you're talking about the atomic bomb, you can't get too subtle,
Okay. So that's your current project at the moment in Australia. You're working on something along that with that production again, or your current project?
We're reworking that, and I'm also about to release an album of ballads that I've written over the years. I felt that I've had enough bizarre romantic situations that I could come up with an interesting album of ballads. So I'm just working on putting that together. And, just looking for more musicals to work on.
And I guess I just want to touch on the Countdown Spectacular in 2007 when Supernaut reunited for that. Is there any possibility of reforming for another tour or Naught's reformation at all?
Well, that was a great experience, playing Sydney in 2007, 30 years after you'd broken up and people were just going crazy. It was an amazing experience, and we all loved being together and playing together. Yes, we've had offers to get. A lot of people come to us with these silly offers or some unusual situations. Doug Feiger, from the Knack wanted us to go to his studio and record the whole album. He was going to produce that because they were on the tour as well. He ended up dying, unfortunately. What a wonderful guy he was. We were interested in doing that because we just liked the idea of being in Los Angeles recording a Naughts album. There's talk about 2016. It will be the 40th anniversary of I Like It Both Ways, having an album ready, a whole new record ready. So we're talking about doing that. Naughts reformations, we have gotten together at different times at different situations. We got together for My Sex as there was a charity thing for the singer who needed some money because he had cancer, or some every now and then when we're all together, we'll get together somewhere. There's talk now about another show, but we all love the fact that we did something really important, and we don't want to just ruin it by just throwing ourselves out there and becoming one of those bands that just sort of continually tours off their name. I think it'd have to be something quite interesting for us to get back together, do a proper tour.
And look, you've been in the music industry for a long, long time now. You've seen its highs and lows. Do you have any specific standout memories or specific gigs that hold a place in your heart, and why?
I do, actually. I think the thing that really sort of got me first time was watching the Rolling Stones rehearse in London. What year was that? It was in '83. We were recording in a studio in Eel Park, one of the studios that were inside a film complex, and the Rolling Stones were across from us rehearsing, and just standing there watching. And I sort of snuck into the room, and I stood there for like half an hour watching Bare Bones Rolling Stone rehearsal, and it just blew my mind because it was just them jumping around in this massive room, playing one song after the other. That really stood out for me. The next one was years later in New York. I got a call from a friend, said Prince was doing a club called Roselands. Come at 10 o'clock. It was one of the impromptu gigs. And watching Prince jam at 2 o'clock in the morning in New York with an all-star band, that was pretty amazing.
Wow.
Those things really stick with you, I think. And I think the other thing, really, the Supernaut 2007 gig really was a very standout for me as well, because especially the Sydney show, because that just brought a lot of things back together for us all. I think that was an amazing experience.
Look, I just wanted to say thank you very much for your time today. That about wraps it up. Philip, I think it's great. You're still out there doing it, and I encourage everyone to go out and check your website, discover your amazing body of work, very much a musical legacy that you've been creating since 1976, and that continues to this day. But look, before we go, every guest on this show gets to request an Australian song. It can be one of your tunes or a song by an Australian band that has meaning for you. What would you like to hear?
I like Vance Joy, My Mess, but that song is really good. I really like that song a lot. I think for me, the best Australian song, I think, is April Sun on Cuba. I think that song to me is so unique in everything. I think to me they were probably my favorite Australian band. But I think contemporary, I like, Chet Faker's song Gold is really great. Or you could just do the Vance Joy song. That song. That's a great song.
Fantastic.
Or you could play We Belong off my album. Your choice.
Okay, we will play something from that. Thanks for your time today, Philip, and it's been fantastic to talk to you.
Awesome. Take care.